Julius, Aristoteles, Moon, Sol Hour, Mercury, Day, which is Sol Night. Sun in the 7th house in Taurus, Venus in the 8th house in Gemini, opposing Lilith. Mercury, 7 degrees Taurus, separating from the square to Pluto. Moon ingress to the middle decan of Capricorn, or the Prepper's decan of Capricorn. Saturn in the 9th house, in the 9th degree of Aries in the 5th, in the 6th, in the 6th, in the 6th. Midheaven with Ketu, ascendant 24 degrees Scorpio. Let's talk denuclification because I have been tending to denuclification since 2020. 2, 3. And reverence to the Sami people, because anybody that even mentions the word denuclification now of course one cannot talk about denuclification without understanding in the age of Pluto sextile Neptune. Then definitely I can see how denuclification is preferred before Neptune squares Pluto. Pluto-Neptune is, we could have some sort of appraisal of the radiation and the leaking. And the radiation, it definitely also means that nuclear energy leak. There is an agreement between leaking Neptune, radiation Neptune, and nuclear energy Pluto. And we had quite some use in A-bombs in the last century. Not just Hiroshima and Nagasaki. A lot of experiments, a lot of linkage. Not just Chernobyl. Now, better to have denucleafication when we still are in the agreement than as we progress to the 2060s, we're going to be in the square. And that would already mean a crisis that could downright take down the water. It's no longer a controlled crisis. And so to understand denucleafication, we need to understand weapon industry. And in weapon industry, basically, there's a bit of a teeter-tatter. Weapon race, and we can, to justify expenses, yes, they need to use. And every first-year student for politics and governance or political science covers pretty much that point. Now, as per nuclear energy, we have in international relations several theories. One of the theories is nuclear balance, and according to that theory, Iran, for example, should have an A-bomb if the United States, Israel, and so on and so forth. And then there is the rational and irrational player, which the Epstein dossiers completely dismantled. I have no idea how come is Khamenei in the in the Epstein. He probably should be. He's very likely in the Epstein dossiers. Now, the nuclear equilibrium is basically playing on the same equilibrium, whether in economy or in any sort of power polarization or multiple poles of power. When we think about the raison d'etre behind the P5, or the Security Council, which is the winners of the Second World War. Russia, China, Ukraine, no. Russia, China, Great Britain, France, and United States, and how that equilibrium is somewhat transforming. And so the reason it had between around the P5 is attempting to have a power equilibrium that contains the East and the West, representation for Europe, and so on, so that it would be difficult to get a decision to invade a country with military, that's what a Security Council is in charge of, without getting a veto. For example, to invade Russia in a multilateral Security Council decision, Russia can veto. Of course, there are the various uses of Article 5 in NATO. There are many other perspectives, for example, a global military alliance, and so on and so forth. Changing of the international arena. And at the same time that a bomb or nuclear energy plays into the logic of power equilibrium, it also plays into the logic of weapon industry. And it seems to me that in the discourse of denuclification, there is an expectation that nuclear energy will operate abnormally to weapon industry. And the good thing about it being a part of weapon industry is the possibility of creating a power equilibrium. The bad thing is that it's very difficult to rejuvenate. Okay, and for example, in Israel had this problem in Pillar of Defense, something like that, Peril of Defense, where the tanks were going in FIFO, first in, first out, and people got killed. There were new tanks. There are other issues. I mean, no less concerning is the ritual abuse, tortured, and mind-controlled plane technician. When there was a stellium in Capricorn, we saw a little bit of that. Competing Peter rings and assassin at the White House that gets to shoot. Funded by classified project budget. Oh now, the issue with weapon is that normally to justify the expenses, people need to see war. Now, first of all, it's something that awareness can contribute a lot to. This is a class that people should be studying in high school before they volunteer to the military. Because if they don't, I was traveling by train in a mandatory army service country, and one of the ladies held a gun. I don't know, it looked like this big, and she started talking about how much she could probably get for this gun um, in weapon trade. She wasn't planning to do that, but she was speaking with a fellow soldier. One soldier that doesn't get, let's say, the emotional support or even food or whatnot, and we're talking about kids in like right after high school. At best, approaching the Uranus square. And the rest is that that person would be, of course, yes, persecuted. To get out of jail, where they would be raped in jail, they would need to do something. And this is where we get targeting individuals. Funded by classified project budget, with classified tech and so on and so forth. Not only that, one of the complaints I heard from people that were negating the dark occult that they use, and again, occult can be venerating Sedna, which negates the Epstein dossiers. But occult can also be, weird stuff. So one of the problems that they had was that the people that are trained, let's say by M. Calfton, are not so, it's kind of like, they take people that got busted and give them an option to bail out or something, and then they don't really know what they're doing. So even for an occultist practitioner to try to negate or to understand what was done and how do they counter that is something that they run into difficulties with. Um, so think about dropping a micro A bomb. You're like, yeah, 48 hours, 30 meters on the ground, and then you can like come out. And so that's what Israelis were told during the war with Iran. So when we're talking about A bombs, they are also a study case of weapon industry. Now about denuclification. When we talk about what derives an A bomb fall, I've addressed that for 3 years, probably more than 1,000 episodes. Rape of infants. Long story short, rape of infants. Where is occultistic, not occultistic, infants being affected by some sort of weird personality cults. How do we create denuclification? By abolishing these practices. We had historical record of disarmament. Japan is regaining weapon. Germany is regaining weapon. 3 years ago, I was looking at the charts of Germany in Spirit of Matter channel, and by the way, I'm not religious. I was never religious. I was wearing a hat that was a winter hat, but only in retrospective I understood what was happening in the background. Anyway, um, and again, um, when an infant is raped, the ability to say no, yes, and maybe is eroded due to the coping mechanism that, and with the nervous system hacking techniques, there is a lot of erosion to those mechanisms. Where juristically we would get the soft skull principle on people in their well into their 60s, 70s, and 80s, namely the people that give the order to drop the bomb. Um, so we had a history of disarmament. I was looking at chart of Germany 3 years ago, and I was seeing Germany rearming, and is one of the greatest contributors to NATO. Um, so we have history of disarmament and rearmament. In that case, denuclification is not something that exceeds historical precedents. Um, case of Japan, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which means two cities with all the human trafficking, with all the ritual abuse, with all the rape, and with all the innocent people and with all the infants, boom. And tremendous margins. 70 years of recovery. Which is why, in many ways, a total human extinction is more humane and more ethical than dropping a bomb on a city. If you don't believe me, at your own risk, watch the margins of the A-bomb in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Now, because what is occultistic rape at the pre-verbal stage was meant also to take control over the speech of people. This is also how those things not only go under the radar, but also recovery is prevented, which I addressed at the previous episode, and juristic system completely dismantled, including International Court of Justice, which we saw in the 1990s, where there was a risk of United States standing to trial for Kurdistani genocide, and then we had the true dossiers taking on somebody that was supporting the separatists at The Hague. Why was Kurdistan mattering? Because those are on the possible railway system from China to Europe, not through Russia. And in that reality, Israel and Iran are New Egypt, as per the United States. And this is why we see processes and thoughts of denuclearification Naturally, any denuclearification of Iran puts Israel in a very compromised position. One would say, oh, it puts the United States in a compromised position. Yeah, good. The Templars tried to charge debt from the monarchy. It ended up with their persecution, that ended up in guillotining, yes, Marie Antoinette, but also a shit ton of Templars. If we go to the origin of that debt, and we go to the idea that infants were affected by occultistic rites that were not so benevolent, um, then it's basically trying to charge a toddler for the rape, which can explain why a lot of the people in the Epstein list simply get away with that. Now, they will, it's not about them getting away or not getting away with that, it's about that stopping to happen. Essentially, what about that rational player theory that you were saying? Yeah, you got it. Don't study anything about politics if you want to remain sane. um, so, denuclearification inherently means no more raped infants. I don't make the rules. That's what Pluto and Neptune deal with. Neptune is the helplessness component and the invisible helplessness. The person we wouldn't think is just that same raped toddler that's trying to assert itself. Pluto's taboo topics like sexuality, where not necessarily where it should be. And the nuclear reaction, unfortunately, when you think about metaphysics and the use of violence to basically dictate or create something in the matter, that is unfortunately the same rituals. Um, an anecdote. Uh, One of my colleagues, um, maybe or maybe not, was involved in experiments done on him, and then him maybe doing, and then I try everything and so on and so forth. I turn to AI, and then I say, but his name, I literally ask for help, and talking about um, things to do or ways to have choice in surroundings where it feels like everything is closing on. And I'm like, okay, we're all up in each other's 12th house. We're just experience one another's experiences. In a timeline where
there is a desire to dissolve plans to have, let's say, global population control or global digital presence or death and concentration camps and so on and so forth, or totalitarian global regime. So um, this is this is a time where indeed denuclification is the right thing to do, the reasonable thing to do. It's not a local, and I don't think we should not elude ourselves that Iran does not understand that, or Israel. Some people say Israel, yeah, it does. Israel doesn't. I don't know. Um, and when we begin to when people begin to state, for example, when there was the war with Iran, the sentiment from the West was, oh, they treat women really bad. We can't just talk about how Iran treats women without improving upon how we treat the feminine. We also need to think about the realistic implications, because if the global society is ruled by all dominating um, not honoring the feminine and so on and so forth, then the world is very likely going to extinction. It's going to be like the Mayans and the Aztecs. Um, Now, to have denuclearification, the things that correlate with nuclear energy worldwide need to be also dismantled. It's a ritual, okay? When they create a bomb, it's not like, oh, they build a bomb, scientists build a bomb. No, there are rituals done. And they need to undo the rituals, meaning either to seize the rituals, or if they created some sort of, I don't know, really malefic protection and so on, and that affected infants, just the seizing of the ritual abuse, let's say, is already a giant step forward. It's going to have to be global. Now, take into account every time every time some kid is tortured in hospital, their consciousness fragments. It's all over the place. All of the parts of the consciousness want to stop the suffering. Googleplex children, the probability that one of them will cause some nuclear leak is almost one. Now, this would not be black hats. I learned a new word. Oh my God. It would be a tortured person in the hospital. Okay, if people see that the team where they have to prevent another shooting at the president, looking at that person, at that physical person that got in there somehow and shot, is not going to prevent the next assassination. Now, could we go without denuclification? No. It's going to the Mayans and Aztecs timeline, which is human extinction. Could we do denuclearification without abolishing ritual abuse and any form of rape or occultistic rape? Nope. Nuclear, the core of the atom, the core of the issue, of the components of the core of the issue. Yes, the world has double-binded itself, but the only way out is actually abolishing the practices that created the air bombs. So, that's a realistic appraisal. Fortunately, Pluto in an air sign means that the science of the nuclear and Saturn around Neptune, we have a good appraisal of the bigger aspect, the hidden aspect, the leaking aspect, the radiation aspect. Um, Understanding the concept of honoring the feminine, and that the feminine is more like the Chinese medicine term yin, is key concept to understand how things went wrong and what can balance them. It's not a gender norm originally. Um, babies are seen as the feminine. Conquered people are seen as the feminine. Women are seen as the feminine. LGBTQ are seen as the feminine, and there is a feminization degradation ritual where each and every person is seen as the feminine until they develop this extreme dominance that is um, unhealthy form of masculine, which makes them susceptible to extortion, and thus make them again the feminine. It's a world undermining mechanism. Um, so, what do I think about the peace talks? First of all, Jupiter will be applying to Procyon. Jupiter in Cancer exalted will be applying to Procyon, squaring Chiron and Aries. Um, Chiron Aries could feel like, how should I say, Aries could feel like downplaying something. So there could be an attempt to downplay certain issues to do with Procyon. And Procyon is about prevention of, let's say, global war, decolonization. So there would be an attempt to downplay the risk and this attempt to downplay the risk would be by people who would feel disincluded by the denuclification process. Which is why all that I said previously is incredibly important. Remember that at the Los Alamos, we had a case for a woman that, and I need to remember her name, but she assisted one of the bomb developers because that was the only guy that treated her good as a woman, intellectually, and so on and so forth. Let's take a look at the name because I used to remember the name. I talked about her a lot. Lily Hornig. Yeah, chemist who worked at Manhattan Project. And then there is Lisa Meitner, the pioneer of the atom who discovered nuclear fission. Um, she initially faced typical workplace sexism, being asked to take a typing test despite her high-level chemistry background. But she pushed back and was eventually hired as a scientist. Why she was treated better? Because Los Alamos created a frontier. And again, frontiers of science is where, in medicine, ailments like cancer that are particularly the terminal ailments, they are a frontier where things that would not be ethical to try are ethical. It's a non-conventional that creates access to also to power, but for many it's simply access to being. Manhattan Project, the government officials didn't have the luxury of being as sexist or racist as they were elsewhere because they were desperate for any respected scientist who could help build the bomb. Um, yeah. Well, in those echelons where power plays a major role and everybody is a rape toddler that doesn't know that doesn't necessarily know that they don't know that is, and I'm not exempt. Like I was to connect dots, even when it comes to astral being affected by the astral, took 4 decades of trying to look normal. Um, yeah. So when we think about this type of atmosphere, and with Neptune, Saturn in Aries, Saturn ruling over Pluto, we're getting another Los Alamos frontier. Hopefully that frontier is denuclification rather than um, now of course Pluto, like if I think about the way Israel called its nuclear project, was a textile factory. I think I told the anecdote that my grandma worked at Gotex. And before retirement, and yeah, it was like, where's your grandma working at a textile factory? Not that one though. And then nobody believes, like, you can't get out of it once you said that. So um, that's the nature of Pluto. Pluto sextile Neptune was keeping that mysteriously, yes, mysteriously no for a while, but Pluto is for a while. Neptune leaks, but Neptune is also mystery, and Pluto is what seems to be hidden and secure for a while. Now, that while, because it's an outer planet, it can be several decades. But I would not count on Pluto staying secretive. This is why Age of Air strategy is more radical acceptance. If I think about my Pluto sextile when Pluto was going over my midheaven, then right before it ingressed to Capricorn around 2006, 2007, I began to identify that there are some things that I like keep secret or keep hidden over nothing. It's like it's over, like, why am I being secretive over nothing? Like Pluto in Scorpio. So and so I began to transform that. I began to consciously change that. And around my Pluto square, it became particularly important because if I would have been even a slight bit of ashamed of what was done to me, I would have been extortable. That continuous work of from Pluto Capricorn, all the way to Pluto, all to the ingress of Pluto Aquarius, which was my Pluto square, and then my Neptune square, of course, eventually ended up with seeing to a drop of the petering. while standing at a juncture of alleviation of corruption, being aware of how the people in those circles were extorted to be in those circles, and how, against all odds, I managed to be at the periphery of the problem, understanding that those practices should be abolished, but also understanding that the people within those circles didn't quite have that privilege, which is strange for people to digest because these are considered the elite. Um, I do have Chiron Aries crossing my Mercury, ruler of the fourth and seventh, Aries natally in agreement with Uranus, in harmonious aspect with Uranus in the 10th. Uh, kind of like I was born to do that. I do not prescribe such a life journey to anyone. Um, and yeah, some people, even though they were raped and tortured, they are ashamed. And just because they are ashamed of something that was done to them, then they could dwindle into doing crime for literally over nothing. Um, more things that I can see regarding the A bomb, regarding denuclification. So Jupiter in a disagreement now. Pluto, like I said, is moving from the square with Aries, slowly becoming decade and a half towards the sextile. That's the closing sextile. If this one is not denuclification with all the ritual abuse and occult associated above and below in spirit and in matter, it's gonna be a global. It definitely denuclification. There's not gonna be no bombs, that's for sure. Um, for those who are interested in nuclear physics, it would be incredibly interesting to go through the Pluto Aries synodic cycle in the philosophy and development of uh, um, physics and mathematics, particularly anything quantum-like. So you would be looking into anything wave-like, which is sound, which is light. I remember when I looked at Bernoulli, it was one of the junctures. I don't remember his chart exactly. And you would be looking at the outer planets as well, outer planets to inner planets. But the Pluto Aries would tell us about major progresses also in the use of A bombs and the various. Now, before that, in the coming 2.5 years, we're going to have Saturn conjoining Aries. Fortunately, Chiron will already be in Taurus. I cannot stress how fortunately, because Saturn rules accumulation of actions. Now, here is the thing: people talk about jurisdiction. I think suffice to say, from what I described, that this might not be the origin of the point of interference. Changing the present system. We need to take into account that these are people that, although have been um, in a swamp of illusions, um, never really got the chance to be safe in their body. While having to demonstrate the most controlled, normal, and powerful and relatable demeanor. Um, and even when people discuss possibilities of execution, euthanasia negates torture as salvation, which was one of the practices that we used to create criminals against humanity. Um, Now, when will the conjunction with Pluto and Aries be? I don't know if it's even in Taurus or in Gemini. So the closing sextile will be important. Okay, Pluto moves around the 50s, 48, around 40, 40, I think it's 490, I think it's 2048, 2045. It moves to Pisces. Then by that time, Aries ingresses to Taurus. Then it's gonna move through Pisces and through Aries. So I don't know how long will Aries be spending in Taurus. If it's gonna be 100 years, then it's still in Taurus. Um, but it takes 500 and I think 520, 26 years through the entire zodiac, which is 12 signs, and it can't be 100. It's like only 500. So, so it's an irregular cycle. Also for Senna takes 12 millennia, but she spent I think only 40 years in, like, not 40 years, but yeah, kind of like not 40 years, but since the 60 late 60s to 2023 4, it's 70 years. 70 years, almost 70 years. Late 50s. No, no, late 60s. I'm not gonna do that now. People are 57, 8. Oh God. Yeah. Um, I'm 42 today. Anyway, um, the right age to tend to our toddler phase. Advanced intelligence. Um, Venus opposites Lilith. Now, ooh. Um, by the way, if you think it's something unusual, no. The unusual is that I'm actually here. Um, Now, this is going to make everything very complicated because the possible peace with Iran is inherently connected to the A bomb. It's like there's oil, there's Hormuz, but they have a nuclear, they have a very big textile factory, as far as I understood from the news. Uh, and so, very likely, this Jupiter's Mars square was possible war, possible peace, desire to have peace, um, a lot of moves towards peace. Again, it does square Chiron in Aries. Um, Jupiter square Chiron in Aries. I have natal Jupiter square Aries. I wrote a satire about the initiation of the war in peace, the war in peace, the war, or the war against peace, but it sounded היוזמה למלחמה בשלום. um, Jupiter is in the prepper decan of Capricorn, Aries in the middle decan of Aries. So, and Mars 22 in ruling over all the outer planets, and Saturn. So, your person at the global world extinction or remediation. um. Anyway. Anyway. Yeah. Tend into your inner child. Finding yourself. Um, and in those circles, mentioning the importance to use actually benevolent occult and not malefic stuff because it's more economic and it supports denuclification. And yes, um, wow, you must be joking. Um, Now, so